Hello and welcome to my new channel. I'm Ryan and this is my workshop. Now this channel is all going to be about anything related to a workshop really. It could be repairing something, it could be making something, it could be working on the car even, maybe even some little projects around the house. And with this being a very new workshop, it's not actually complete yet, so some of the videos may even feature some of the work I'm doing on the workshop itself. But today is actually going to be about fitting brake pads to an Audi A6 C7. I've already fitted the pads to the driver's side, but I'm going to head out in a minute and fit the brake pads to the passenger side, which incorporate the sensor. So I'm going to take you along with me and show you how it's done. Now the first thing you're going to need to do before you jack the vehicle up is to undo the wheel bolts. Only a little bit though, just slacken them off a little bit, not too much. The only reason for this is if once you've jacked the vehicle up and you try to undo the tight bolts, it will try to turn the wheel as well. Obviously with it being on the ground it can't do that. And also to remember your locking wheel nut if you have them. So remember just a little bit, just to slacken them off slightly. The next step is to actually jack the vehicle up. Now if you have the vehicle's own jack then use it. On the Audi A6 you have 4 jacking points. You have one here and they're indicated by a small arrow. You have one at the front and the rear of both sides. With me I'm going to be using a trolley jack to jack it up. Now with this being on stones I'm using a small piece of wood just so the jack don't sink into the stones. Safety tip, I would never advise to go under a vehicle with just the jack itself, as it could collapse and the car could drop on you. So in my case, I'm going to be using an axle stand. So now it's time to remove all 5 of the bolts that you previously loosened off and to remove the wheel completely. Okay, now the wheel's off, you have much better access to get underneath and actually see where we can put the axle stand to make it safe to get underneath the vehicle. Now on here, if you actually look just here, it's actually part of the body that is, you can see it's quite a sturdy area to put your axle stand, so I'll place that just right underneath there. Now although that's not touching completely, if the jack did collapse it would still land on that and it won't crush you, which is obviously a lot safer. Now once you've placed the axle stand and it's safe to get underneath, what you're going to want to do next is actually turn your steering onto full lock. Now if you're working on the passenger side like I am, you want to turn your steering all the way to the right, and if you're working on the driver's side then you want to turn the steering all the way to the left. The reason for that is basically just to make it easier to access the bolts on the back of the caliper. The next step is actually going to be under the bonnet. Under here you want to locate the brake fluid reservoir, which is under here, which if you take a step back you can see it's just at the back there on an Audi A6, and you want to basically just remove the cap, just lift it out. The reason you want to do that is just to allow for the fluid to rise up when you retract the piston on the caliper, which I'll show you how to do in a little while. Now this is actually the rear view of the caliper, and what you're going to want to do here is this bolt just here and this bolt just here are going to need to be undone. It's basically a 13mm head and it's the sliders for the caliper which will allow you to release the main body of the caliper itself. So we'll start off with undoing those. One. 2. Now once you've removed both of them, you're going to want to come back around the front. You're going to want to remove this spring just here. Now to remove this spring you're going to need a fairly sturdy flathead screwdriver, something similar to this. And to remove it, your best bet is probably around the back here. Get it underneath, and then you've just got to be careful that it don't fly off in your face because it will ping. Okay, that was a perfect example of what not to do. Try not to make it ping off like that, but anyway, found the spring. Basically what that spring is an anti-vibration spring. to stop the front end of the caliper like vibrations or high-pitched squealing. Usually helps to stop all that noise. Now once you remove that, it's going to be a case of removing the caliper. Get the screwdriver in there and lever away like so. And the same at the bottom. And by doing that, it should release it enough for you to be able to twist the caliper backwards and forwards. There you go, just like that, and it should come off in one piece. And then you want to remove the brake pad sensor. You need to put a little flathead screwdriver just behind this little clip here to lift it up, and then it should rotate like so, and just pop out. There we go. Then you can unplug the sensor by pulling this back just here. Sometimes helps actually to push the plug in at the same time to release, and then you pull the plug out. There you go, and that's that released. So now what you want to do is lift the caliper back up and remove this brake pad from the back. Not the piston side, this is the piston side. Remove this pad just here first. Should just pop out. There we go. That's that pad out. Now with the second one, what we need to do is actually retract this piston all the way back in. So when we put the new pads in, we'll have enough space to be able to get it back over the disc. Now to do that, you're going to need either a G-clamp or, in this case, clamp just like this one. Does the job just fine. What you want to do, we get the caliper up here, and this can be a bit fiddly, but once it's on, it's going to be quite hard to show you as well, but once it's on, give it a few squeezes. You should see the piston start to retract. And there we go, that one's fully retracted. So remove your clamp, and then that allows you to remove this pad, which has actually got a clip on the back of it that clips into the piston itself, as you can see there. I'll be a bit careful with this one because this is the one that actually has the sensor, which in this case you can actually see is well worn out there. Carefully put the caliper back behind there, because now you want to prepare the new brake pads to go in. In the box you should have one brake pad, standard pad, and a second pad with the clip on that plugs into the piston. You should also have, for this side anyway, a new sensor and a couple of new bolts, those 13mm bolts we took out earlier on. These are brand new ones to replace the ones you took out. So what we want to do first is fit the sensor to the pad that has the clip on the back. Goes in like so. Literally just pushes on like that with the wire pointing backwards in the direction of the clip. And now we can proceed to fit the pads to the caliper. So yeah, the first pad clips into the piston. Remember, now we need to feed the wire through for the sensor through the back of the caliper, through the little hole in the back, just like so. We can fit the brake pad into the piston by clipping it in just like that. And then I'm going to take the second pad, which on these actually have a locating pin on the back of the pad there. It locates into a little hole inside the caliper just there. And then once both of the pads are in, we can then move on to fitting the caliper back over the disc, which should be quite easily if you've retracted the piston all the way. It should just slide straight on. Actually, one quick tip here as well, down the back here, where you took the bolts out of, the two 13mm bolts are actually, you've got sliders which are quite hard to see, they're just there. What you want to do is basically push the sliders all the way back, which should be quite easy to move. Top one and the bottom one, which will then allow you to fit the caliper back on without those without that colliding with this. So if you don't retract them, obviously that's going to hit that and you're going to struggle to get the calipers on. So once that's done, caliper should just slot on nicely. Make sure it's firmly on. So once the caliper's back into position, you want to take your new bolts that come in the pack with the pads and fit them back in the place of the old original ones. Now obviously you'll have to line the caliper up until it starts to do up, which can be a bit tricky sometimes. There we go, you can see that's the top one in, and give it a little wiggle and they should go in, no problem whatsoever. Now if we just tighten those up, now you can actually, if you look here, there's like a small hook for the cable of the sensor to fit through, and then we can plug that back into the plug. Make sure you have here the little clip. There you go, little clip there, and then you can slide it back into its little holder and then rotate until the little clip locks into position. That little lug which I was showing you earlier on, this little lug just here, make sure that's into the hole so it can't undo and go anywhere. And then we can clip this cable, which was actually originally hooked under there. Just helps keep the cable out of the way and hanging down, that's all. Now once you've done that and you've got the two bolts in nice and tight and the sensor plugged back in, it's time to refit this spring, which actually can be quite tricky. Now the way I normally do it, I try to get this piece in here first, then the centre of the clip in, and then we're going to need a small screwdriver, or any screwdriver, to try and basically, if we push your thumb on the centre piece there and hold that in, use a screwdriver to bend the clip onto the outside, just like so. And then just make sure it's correctly seated. Everything looks secure. Now it's time to straighten the steering back up and fit the wheel back on. Now just a quick tip when you put in the wheel nuts back on, you always want to do, like for example in this case, that top one up, then you go the opposite, which on this, because it has 5, you can't go exactly opposite, so you go for the bottom two, like in a triangle sort of configuration. Do them all up by hand first. Now the reason I say to do them up the opposites is because that makes sure that you have the wheel located centrally onto the hub. And now we can just nip them up just a little bit. Now remembering what I said, nip the top one up and then the opposites, nip them up, give them a good tweak, and then you can do the other two up, give them a good tweak as well. Now make sure they're done up fairly tightish. I mean, you won't be doing fully up because the wheel's still off the ground and it tries to turn. Now, before you drop the car down, remember to remove, in my case, my axle stand. Now we can let the car down. Nice and slow. And now, we can actually do the bolts up nice and tight. Never over tighten bolts on an alloy wheel though. And remembering again to follow the top ones and then the opposites. So there we go. Wheels back on, brakes are fitted. The last thing to remember, and put this cap back on. Just don't forget to put that back on. Actually, I didn't show you before, but you can see in there the reservoir is actually raised back up from where we retracted the piston to fit the pads. That's the last step, and you can close the bonnet down after that one. So there you go, brake pads fitted. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope I described everything in such a way that you can understand what I'm trying to say. But I do have plenty of videos coming up in the future too. I have loads of projects coming up, one of them being my workshop. I have obviously car repairs coming up in the future. I have all kinds of stuff to share with you. So if you did like this video, give it a thumbs up, click the subscribe button and the bell notification so you're notified when I upload, which will hopefully be quite regular. Anyway, until next time, take care.